Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. Joining us this week is none other than Steve Starr, Director of Carrier Operations at SignalWire and expert of everything messaging and carriers. Thank you for joining us today, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Luca. I appreciate you having me on here.
Would you like? Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Would you like to give us a quick introduction about yourself, how you got started in the industry?
Yeah, for sure. So I started in telecom in general almost 20 years ago. Just right out of school, working for a telecom, and first started learning all sorts of things about voice routing in the U.S., regulations, and all of that stuff. And then, like 18 years later, found myself at SignalWire, brought on to manage the carrier operations team here. And that's where I really started deep diving into messaging itself. So traditionally, my background is more voice related. With SignalWire, it's much more of a focus on messaging and following all those trends.
Good. Yeah, that's. Messaging is always a bit of an exoteric topic because while the medium itself, it's pretty simple. It's probably the simplest way of doing communication. Similar than fax. It's certainly easier than getting right than fax. There's been a lot of changes in the industry over the few years. I've been with SignalWire since the start, and I've seen a few big changes happening from the outside. So what are the major things you need to know if you want to get started with messaging in your company, say for various reasons, which we'll get to later. But if you want to get started sending messages, what do you need to know?
So it depends. First, you should know which country you are messaging in because each country has different regulations and how to do it. With a focus in the U.S. because that's where most of our customers' messaging currently happens. Is you need to make sure that you register your brand in your campaigns. And we make that very easy. We have excellent wizards that will help walk you through the process of making sure that you check all those boxes and get it registered. Brand, most importantly, make sure you're an established business, you have a website, and all that stuff is verifiable. Once you get that submitted and approved, then we can work on getting the campaign for your messaging set up and approved. And in that case, it's important to make sure that you have sample messages. You're very descriptive on what your messaging is all about. All that stuff helps ensure that it will get approved to send messages, but also that your messaging is allowed content as well. So part of that is just making sure that it's allowed to be sent and you won't risk being shut down by the mobile operators for disallowed content.
Good. That's very, very interesting. So one thing that some people might not know, what does it mean to register your brand?
It means that you submit a form through SignalWire's website, and part of that form is putting in your basic business information, your name, tax ID, website, contact information, all that stuff. And then there's a vetting process that happens just to verify that it's a legitimate business. And the purpose there is just to cut down on possible scammers or people sending spam that might try to create fake accounts that are going to send, disallowed content. And this is just to verify that you are who you say you are.
Okay. And what about content? Do you need to specify the content you're going to be sending?
Yes, you do. There's a long list of different things that you could select between political, marketing, mixed use is even an item. It kind of just helps narrow down the specific category, and each category comes with different kind of restrictions and what you can do. So it just helps narrow it down.
So you're not going to have to give actual examples like you did with short codes, but instead you're just picking a category.
You will have, yeah, you have to give examples too. So you
Oh,
part of your submission for the campaign. So after your brand is approved, you submit a campaign. You will have the opportunity to list sample messages, and it's not exactly like a template where you have to send that specific text itself, but they're general sample messages that the end users can expect to receive. We recommend submitting 3 to 5 of these just to make sure that it's very clear on the type of messaging that's going through. So you would select the category, you'd fill out a description of that campaign, what its purpose is, what you're doing with it, and then sample messages. And if you're going to be sending MMS messages, then attaching samples of the media that you're going to be sending is good as well.
the name campaign might be a little bit misleading, just a little bit. What is it actually something that has a start and an end, or is it like something you set up and then you like say I'm setting up a software that sends reminders. I register my brand. I give you 5 examples of reminders like, "Hello, Mr. Luca, you have an appointment tomorrow at 9, whatever." Do I need to do that each I don't know each year or whatever, or is it something that will be ongoing forever?
It's typically perpetual where it would go on forever. But we do occasionally have to go through and refresh campaigns. So we'll get requests from like a mobile operator. Verizon asked us to do this where older campaigns that have been sitting around for a while, we reach out to those companies and ask them to just refresh it or help them just update it to ensure it's meeting new guidelines. As things change and new guidelines or requirements come out, we have to make sure that everything is staying up to date.
So, are there any complete no goes or mistakes you can make when you're trying to send messages? How do I get my messages not sent?
How do you get a not send? Yeah, there is. So first, there's it has to be legal in all 50 states and federally. So marijuana, for example, while legal in some states, not legal in all states, and not legal federally. So it's not something that can be sent out through messaging. That would be disallowed content. Another thing is phishing or social engineering scams, and these are becoming uh, very widely used at the moment, where basically it's someone trying to befriend someone and then we'll try to just get them to send them gift cards or money or whatever. Or another example are shaft messages, and that stands for sex, hate, alcohol, firearms, or tobacco. Also, disallowed content if it falls within any of those. So it's there's a few different ways you can stop your messages from happening. So yeah, the other important thing is ensuring that you are collecting opt-ins from your consumers. So there is a clear way that consumers opted to receive your messaging, and that you're not just sending messaging out based on a third-party list that you purchased. The reason for this is one, it makes sure that those consumers want to receive those messages from you, which means they're less likely to report those messages as spam. Having a high number of messages reported as spam will result in mobile operators or DCAs to shut down the campaigns and stop the messaging altogether.
Okay, so yeah, that's sounds like it's a good. Are there other minor things like I remember something about links messages, which have to be some URL shorteners don't really work. Is it still the case, or has they been
Mhm.
superseded?
Yep, nope, that you are correct. So publicly available URL shorteners are not available. If you're using a URL shortener that is with your own domain name, Amazon, for instance, they can use their own URL shortener.
AMZ, something like that.
Yeah, correct. Google, same way, GOO.LE or whatever I forget what they do. But yeah, those are allowed. But publicly available, Bitly, for example, or any of those, they're not allowed, and that will get you shut down as well.
Yeah, that's there's a lot there. So, well, going into let's go the reverse. So we figure out which industries cannot use messaging, some legitimately. So, last question about that though. Does the legality no 50 state plus federal always apply? So effectively, you're not allowed to send messaging. So no marijuana messaging ever for the moment, right? Not even if you're in Colorado and using Colorado numbers. No way it works.
Correct. Yep.
Because you can't make sure the recipients are in the appropriate states, and it immediately gets complicated.
Yeah, exactly. You can't ensure that mobile number is actually within Colorado, for instance. Plus, these are national regulations and not just state regulations.
So one thing I was looking at, and comes up sometimes when we talk about customers and messaging, there is a distinction between A2P and P2P messaging. Does that apply to any of these? Like, does P2P not need a campaign or whatever?
Yeah. So TCR, the campaign registry, well, actually, CTIA, who controls these guidelines, messaging best practices, they're starting to change the naming on this to help clear up some confusion. So they're adjusting P2P to be consumer to consumer and A2P to be business to consumer. And so the idea there is to just kind of help make sure people understand the differences. And so to answer your question, P2P or consumer to consumer does not need a campaign, but to qualify for P2P messaging, there's other hoops that you have to jump through, like having a working application that you can show off and prove that you are actually developing what you say you are developing. It's kind of a difficult process to go through,
but it can be done.
It can be done. Yeah, it can. Yep, we have some customers who utilize that at the moment, so we can help guide anyone through that process if they're looking to develop an application, or advise them on if their use case really qualifies for a P2P application or not.
If I remember correctly, it was even unclear for a long time whether or not you could do A2P on an API. So I'm glad that's now cleared up. Nobody
yeah. Yeah, it's confusing. I still get that question quite a bit. People try to argue that just because it's a live person sending the message that it's P2P, which isn't always true. Basically, if the message is coming from a business, be it a employee of the business, an agent of the business is what CTIA says, or an application or an automated thing, it doesn't matter. If it's business related in any way, then it's considered A2P traffic. And there's different use cases you can use for it, but that's the big distinguishing thing. P2P is purely, friend to friend, or maybe a parent to a child, or sibling to sibling, that kind of thing. Not business related at all.
So one thing I'd like to ask you, because it's been confusing to me too, if there is some kind of extra carrier fee for sending messages that differs by carrier, is that correct? And there's no way to figure it out before you send it effectively.
Yeah, that is correct. We do have some of our fees published on our website under the messaging, so you can see those there. But yes, each carrier has their own fees. They do change from time to time, not a lot, but once in a while we do get adjustments for those fees. So yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, And to know if a number is on a certain carrier, you will have to do an LCR dip for look it up in the carrier registry before you send interior, right?
Yeah. Yep. You can. Yeah. So you can use our number lookup to look that number up to see who the carrier is, and match the fees up that way. Our webhooks. So once you send the message, our webhooks and everything will respond back with that information, also letting you know what the fees are and all that stuff.
So since they're not that different, it's probably easier to just send the first message for a campaign and see what happens.
It is, unless you want to run your own database on your side to try to figure out and match that up for your customers. So a lot of providers will kind of work those fees after the fact and send them at the end of the month instead of in real time. But we try to provide that information in real time just so our customers are, as up to date as possible as to what the fees are.
That's still pretty, yeah. It's good. I mean, I like how SignalWire did it. We did a very good job of building an SMS infrastructure, but in general, you do need to work with someone like SignalWire to do messaging. I assume at this point,
Mhm.
there's no other way you can get it going with just sitting down and just buying bulk and sending it.
Yeah, that's correct. You have to work with an aggregator of some sort. We're an aggregator who can help you get your messaging out to the world. And I think we've done an excellent job with the way we put it all together, the way we manage it, the way our APIs make sure that the information is very clear and what's happening with your messaging.
So before we go into some business related questions, such as sort of the major markets for SMS, I have one really question that I actually want to ask you. So I've seen that you can buy hardware like small modems where you can put 8 SIM cards into them, 16, 100, whatever, huge modems where you can put 100 SIM cards in there. And some people seem to be under the impression that if you buy one of those, you put 8 SIM cards in it with unlimited messaging and start sending, that will work. Why is that not the case? Because I know it doesn't, but I really don't even know why.
Yeah, it it will work until it doesn't work and you get shut down. That's what will happen. So you are correct. Yeah, you could do that. You can buy it. You can start sending messages. But what will happen, and especially if you send messages at any sort of volume or higher send rate than what a normal person would actually send messages at, is the mobile operators that you're sending through will notice that it's an unusual high volume of messaging. Then they'll look to see what those messages actually are. And chances are you'll get noticed at that point and just completely shut down on the messaging. It's a very big difference between the send rates that an average person will send on their phone versus what a business is going to send out.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. If the first discriminator is the send rate should be similar to a person, I assume someone very quick with typing, like us when we were younger and only had SMS to communicate. You could send a message in about a minute ish. So I guess maybe let's assume a minute to be able to send 60 messages per hour with one SIM card. So you're less than 500 with 8 SIM cards, and I mean, I assume the carriers are okay with that. But even a simple alert that sent out to SignalWire is 10 or 20,000 messages, and it goes out in seconds because it has to go out at that moment because 5 minutes
Mhm.
might be too late. So I think that's the scale that viewers should be aware of. It's hundreds versus tens of thousands of send
Yeah,
rate.
correct.
That's the first thing. Then managing all the SIM cards, etc., sounds complicated. But okay, I'm asking just because occasionally I have friends. I mean, we work in the business. And people know I work in the business. I have friends who occasionally send me a link from Amazon, thinking, "Hey, I'm going to buy one of these," and just start sending messages. And I always say, I know why. I know it doesn't work. I don't exactly know why, but you should probably just save the money. And
Mhm.
in general, that's the I assume the legitimate use cases are for actual low volume sending. Maybe you're trying to manage traffic for multiple people. Still sounds more complicated than just using an API, frankly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or monitoring. That's probably the biggest reason that I have seen those. So some sort of alarm monitoring. Maybe you run a large scale network and you have a remote cabinet somewhere, and you have that device in there that just you know monitors whatever and will send alerts if you need alerts. And in that case, you might get half dozen a month, and that's extremely low volume, and they don't care about those. Yeah, so there is a use case, but it's very very limited.
And the multiple SIM cards will be mainly for redundancy, not for sending more messages.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's I think that's actually something I'm happy I asked you, because honestly, it comes up and it's not super immediate to understand, because people by phone, their plan says unlimited messaging. Great! Now I can send as many messages as I like. Unlimited is actually unlimited within the confines of how fast your fingers are, apparently.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's good to know. So, well, going into the industry. So, say now that we're determining how to actually get your messages to send,
Mhm.
what are the main industry sectors that you see using messaging on SignalWire?
So political, especially this year within the US because of the uh, presidential election that we have coming up. That is a big section of messaging, not just with SignalWire, but other messaging providers as well, especially within the MMS area. They send a lot of MMS messages out. Secondly, it would be um, like order updates. That's another big one out there. So just sending status updates there, um, or customer support. Have seen some of that as well, or appointment reminders. So any sort of appointment reminders, healthcare maybe, or you have someone coming out to your house to do work, those kinds of reminders. It kind of varies, I guess.
As someone who isn't from the US, and I often speak with people from Europe that we don't use a lot of messaging to begin with.
Mhm.
It's more alive in the US than Europe, but especially political traffic, I find it interesting. So, what is actually being sent in those messages? Because I don't know. Is it like
Mhm.
vote for me, vote for him, or is it fundraising? What is in there?
Yeah, it's there's a little bit of a mix. So there is fundraising. Um that's a big part of it. And then after that there's a mix of um maybe currently elected officials. So there is a difference between sending campaigns for if you are running for office for something versus a sitting elected official, and you're sending messaging out that is from your office. So those are two different things. But lumping them together as political, there is stuff going out that's just sending updates, FY, bill, whatever passed. And they can be very political in nature, where it's one side calling out the other side, or maybe trying to get people to vote no on a certain proposed bill in that state. And then the other thing is during elections, sending stuff out saying, "Hey, vote for me," is what happens. So we just had a large election at the beginning of March, and a lot of um, videos actually get sent out, because it's been noticed that they get more views and clicks if they send actual content out instead of just an SMS message.
Hmm. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's so yeah, the I think that's a use case that's a bit foreign to Europeans. I'm wondering why SMS is more of a use base in the US than in Europe. Might it be because the country is so large and at the same time so homogeneous? So there
Mhm.
are places where you don't see a human being for 50 miles while driving. So there is no signal for anything else, probably.
Yeah, I think that's probably it. So it while we are individual states, we do still act as one country. So me texting someone within my own state is no different than me texting someone in California. The rates are the same. Everything else is the same. Phone numbers, country code, all of that is the same. So it's very very easy to use. Even between U.S. and Canada, we follow the same numbering scheme. Stuff tends to get blurred. So that's probably the biggest thing, as opposed to, you in Italy having to remember the country codes for like French and
Um,
Belgium and all that. And even the numbering, the number of digits in those numbers is different. We just have 10 digits. So there's a difference there too.
yeah, the it's interesting how if you superimpose the U.S. on top of Europe, you realize Europe is smaller than the United States. Well, it's shaped different, but I think they're pretty much almost the same size. But we have like 30 languages and 30 different countries, and so I think the homogeneity of the market plays a role. Also, again, density means that you're never far from a 4G cell here,
Hmm.
at least a 4G cell. The average density is like 10 times the density of the US. I mean, I've only been to Wyoming once. And at one point, I was really scared that my car could break down while I was driving because I hadn't seen anyone for an hour and
Hmm.
literally no person alive for an hour, just me and my family. And I wouldn't even know, like, if my car stops, I'm done for. And I remember there was no 3G signal for a lot of it. It was just GSM, those edge stuff.
Hmm.
So messaging probably plays a role because of the differences in how the country operates, which is absolutely great. It's just well, fax. I don't have an explanation for fax. You're just weird. You and the Germans,
Yeah.
you and our German friends, you're just weird. I don't know why fax is still a thing.
Yeah. No, I think you're right though. It's yeah, there's a large amount of the country that has very limited signal. I mean, even within my state, Michigan, there's sections where I know I will have limited signal on what I can do. So, using something that requires data for communicating is very unlikely. I could probably get a phone call out, maybe a text message, and that's about it. But definitely no data. So that's a fair point.
Very, very important. Yeah, again, maybe one day we'll do an episode of fax, which will just consist of asking the audience why.
Why?
Why, God, why? No, I want to know why.
Because healthcare refuses to give up vaccine. That's why.
It is, yeah, it's just that. And oddly enough, again, Germany has the same mechanism for the same reason. Healthcare insurance in Germany runs on fax.
Hmm.
No, I don't know, it has to be, originates from the same companies that mandated that back in the day, and then they didn't update or whatever. I know in Italy, I can't find a fax machine if I have to. And a few years ago, I had to send a fax or something, and I ended up having to rig up something with SignalWire just to send one. I didn't know how else to do it, but no, luckily I knew how to do it SignalWire. So if
Right.
you need to do faxing, use someone who know what to doing like SignalWire, but use email and use our messaging, which is much better. So
Hmm.
that's my suggestion. So last quick question: is there any regulations that are different for MMS aside from size of attachments, whatever, or does the same things apply to MMS aside from again the content?
Yeah, it's yeah, everything else pretty much applies the same. It's you're under the same content rules. So if you send an image or a video that contains that disallowed content, so again using marijuana, you can't send a video along that provides that messaging. It's still disallowed. Sizing is the biggest thing. Carriers like to see content that is under 1 megabyte in space. It otherwise it typically will just end up getting rejected, and so transcoding that becomes important.
but you will need to provide examples of the content in case you're
Mhm.
sending images or videos. You have to same way you provide 5 examples of messages with MMS. You will have to provide 5 videos or whatever so that people know what's the
Yep, correct.
the other problem with MMS. I think is the size of the attachment, right? Which is not easy to figure. It's kind of like the carrier charge for each carrier. The size of attachments isn't very clear to me either. I've helped a couple of customers, but I always have to come to you for how does that work? Like, is there even a way to know if you're allowed to send something or not?
um, yeah, I mean, putting it into the campaign is a good way to know. Otherwise, it could get rejected if you're not allowed to send it. Otherwise, just verifying that it's the correct size. You could just look at the size of your computer or however, or upload it, and see how it looks and what the size is. Another good recommendation is to just test it and before you go to send your messaging out in general. If you have friends or employees of the business who have devices on different mobile networks, it would be good practice to just send those out to them to verify that the content or the media you're sending out will actually go through and it won't get rejected. um, Sometimes it gets PDF, for instance, that does not transmit well through
Hmm.
MMS, and so that'll verify that you can actually get through what you're trying to get through.
Is there an absolute safe payload, like something that should send in all cases? Small image, maybe.
Yeah, small image, GIFs, those typically will go through. Having an image or a GIF over 1 megabyte is quite big. Video is where it starts to get a little questionable. If you keep your video around 30 seconds, something quick, to the point, it typically will not have a problem with going through. But again, it just depends on how it's recorded and all of that. It gets rather complex with video, but images typically will go through fine.
Well, that's it. Great. So, well, again, thank you for everything, and thank you. Just a lot of good information, a lot of things that I didn't know firsthand, and a lot of people don't know. And for any other information, you can come to SignalWire and ask. Steve's team is always ready to help, and they did a great job with the campaign registry and related stuff. So, really, come take a look. We can help you with all your traffic. So, well, Steve Starr, Director of Carrier Operations, SignalWire, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Luke. I appreciate being here.
And the rest of the people, see you next week. Bye.